My name is Nicole Dooley. I'm a supervising attorney in the Public Benefits Unit here at Legal Aid DC, and I'm joined by Haley Mart, a staff attorney in our unit. And today we're going to be going through some upcoming changes to the SNAP or food stamp program in DC. And we will have plenty of time for questions at the end. If you have questions as we're moving through our presentation, please feel free to drop them into the chat. I also wanted to flag that we are recording today's presentation, and we're planning to share the recording and the slides after the presentation. So feel free to not have to take notes or anything while we're going. You'll get all the materials afterwards. So just for a quick overview of our topics for today, we're going to start with a background on the work requirement changes that will be coming to DC, why they're coming, what they are, when they're going to start. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some exemptions to the coming work requirements. For those who are not exempt, how to meet the work requirements, and then how to be prepared for these changes. And then again, we should have plenty of time for questions at the end. So just to start with a bit of background on the SNAP work requirement changes. And to start just with a little bit of background on what SNAP is. SNAP, or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, provides assistance for buying food for low-income residents in DC. And the district historically has had one type of work requirement called the general work requirement, but the vast majority, or basically most to all of the people who are eligible for SNAP in DC are meeting that general work requirement. But due to changes in the federal Big Beautiful Bill that was passed last year, DC now, or people who are receiving SNAP in DC now have to meet an additional work requirement called the ABAWD work requirement. And ABAWD stands for Able-Bodied Adults Without Dependents. This work requirement was initially aimed at people who don't have young children and who are people without disabilities or without other medical impairments that keep them from working, and making sure, or imposing work requirements for them. And I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. Is anyone else hearing an echo?
Yes.
Is that better? Okay. Haley, I think you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
Sorry, I was saying I'm going to mute everyone else, but I think you're better now.
Okay, thank you. So due to the changes in the Big Beautiful Bill, DC for the first time is going to be implementing the ABAWD work requirement. So everyone who receives SNAP benefits in DC or who applies for SNAP benefits in DC will be reviewed by the DC Department of Human Services, which is the agency that administers SNAP benefits, to see if they are meeting these requirements or qualify for an exemption. So when do these new requirements start? June 1st is the date that they will be programmed into the computer system at DHS. So this means for anyone who is already receiving SNAP benefits, you will be screened, or they will be screened to see if they are exempt from or meeting these new requirements at their first recertification date after June 1st, 2026. So for example, if somebody had to recertify just this month in April 2026, assuming their next recertification date is April 2027, that will be when they are screened for meeting these work requirements in April 2027. But if somebody's recertification date is in July 2026, they will be screened in July 2026, because that's after June 1st, 2026. For people who are applying for SNAP benefits, anyone applying after June 1st, 2026 will be screened at the time of their application. So anyone who applies in May 2026 will not be screened, but anyone applying in June will be screened to see whether they are exempt from or meeting the work requirements. DHS had originally stated that they were going to implement these changes May 1st, So you may have received a letter or seen information on the DHS website that this would be going into effect this coming Friday, but they have since updated that date to June 1st, 2026. So you can disregard any notice that provides that they're starting May 1st, 2026. How to know if these work requirements apply to you. And we'll go into this a bit more in the next couple of sections, but they apply to anybody who is at least 18 years old through 64 years old. So if you're under 18, they don't apply to you. And if you're 65 or older, they should not apply to you. And they don't apply to anyone meeting an exemption. And to cover the exemptions, I'm going to turn it over to Haley.
Great, thank you, Nicole. So now we're going to walk through some of the exemptions that folks might be able to have so that they are not required to meet these work requirements. Next slide, please. So there are several categories. Here are the first two. The first, again, is a restatement of the age requirement. So again, these work requirements only apply to folks who are between 18 and 64. So if you're younger than 17 or older than 64, or younger than 18, 17 or younger, or 65 or older, you would not, you would be exempt and would not need to meet the work requirements. The next category are health-related exemptions. So there are 4 on the screen. The first is that someone has a physical or mental health condition that makes it difficult for them to work 20 hours per week. The second is if someone is pregnant. The third, if someone is in a substance abuse treatment program. Or the fourth is if someone is already receiving a disability-related benefit. So common ones include SSDI, workers' compensation, or veterans' disability benefits. Next slide, please. Here are 2 more categories of exemptions. So the first are employment and education related exemptions. So we're going to talk a little bit more in a little bit about how to meet the work requirements, but one way to actually be exempt from the work requirements is working 30 hours or more per week. Another one related to work that is actually an exemption is earning more than $217.50 per week before taxes. And the before taxes is key. And then the final in that category is if someone is enrolled at least half-time in a school, a training, higher education, or a federally recognized refugee program. So if there's some sort of training or school program that someone is engaging in at least half-time, they might be exempt. The next category is caretaker responsibilities. And the first under that category is someone who's living in a SNAP household with a child under 14. So to be in a SNAP household are the group of individuals who purchase and prepare food together. It's typically folks who live together, but it's possible that if someone lives with someone else, but they purchase and prepare food completely separately, you know, say a roommate who you technically live with, but you don't purchase and prepare food together, you would be in separate SNAP households. But if you're in a SNAP household with a child under 14, that would be an exemption. And then 2 more caretaking exemptions. These don't apply specifically to the SNAP household. So the first one is caring for a child under 6. Again, they don't have to be in your SNAP household, and in fact, they don't have to be in your household at all. So if you're caring for a child under 6, whether they're inside or outside your home, that would be an exemption. And then the last one, caring for someone who is ill or disabled. Again, they don't have to be in your SNAP household, and in fact, they don't have to be in your household at all. Next slide, please. And then the last 2 exemption categories are receiving other benefits programs or Indigenous identity. So first for programs, we already talked about one category of programs in the health category that someone might be exempt if they receive. So those were the disability-related programs like SSI or SSDI. But here are 2 more programs. The first is if someone is receiving or applying for unemployment insurance compensation. And then the second is if you are participating in a different program, such as a TANF program or a cash assistance program, and you are already meeting that program's work requirements, you would be exempt. And then the last category are folks who are considered to be American Indian, Alaska Native, Urban Indian, or California Indian. And next slide, please. So one really important thing to note is when you're considering these exemptions, you're actually going to look at every single individual in the SNAP household. So for example, if you are a SNAP household of 3, maybe it's you and your 2 children, you would look at yourself to see if there's an exemption, your child 1 to see if there's an exemption, and child 2 to see if an exemption. So each person should be individually screened to see if they are exempt or if they should meet the work requirements. And we're going to go through some examples to kind of help illustrate this in a second. Next slide, please. So the first example we have is Amber and Ben. Amber and Ben are both 30 years old, and they live with their child, Chris, who is 10 years old. And Amber, Ben, and Chris are all part of the same SNAP household. So the question we're trying to answer is, who, if anyone, is exempt from these work requirements? And if you'll click for me, Nicole. So here we can see that, yes, in fact, all of them are exempt from the work requirements. But again, we want to screen each of them individually to see if that's true. So looking first at Amber, Amber is exempt from the work requirements because she is in the same SNAP household as a child under 14 as Chris. And then second, we're going to go to Ben. We want to screen Ben separately, but in fact, Ben is exempt for the exact same reason as Amber. So though the exemption is the same, we want to screen them separately. And then finally, turning to Chris, Chris is exempt because he is not 18 or over, or not 18 to 64. Since Chris is 10, he's 17 or younger, so he's not subject to the work requirements. So no one in this household would need to meet these work requirements. And next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So the next example we have is Denise, who's 18, who lives with her mother, Emily, and Emily's 40. So Denise is enrolled full-time in an apprentice training program, and then Emily, her mother, does not work because she cares for her disabled mother part-time. So again, the question is, who, if anyone, is exempt from the work requirements? And click, please. And again, we're going to screen them individually, but we're going to determine that both Denise and Emily are exempt from the work requirements. So Denise is exempt because she's enrolled at least half-time in a qualifying education or training program, that apprentice program that she's in full-time. So she's exempt. And then looking separately at Emily, her mother, Emily is caring for her disabled mother. And it doesn't actually matter that her mother doesn't live with her, that her mother's not in a SNAP household because she's caring for her because she's disabled or ill. So both Denise and Emily, when screened separately, would be exempt, and neither of them would have to meet the work requirement, this particular work requirement. And then the next example we have are for Frank and Greg. So Frank is 45 years old and lives with his brother Greg, who is 42. They are in the same SNAP household, meaning they purchase and prepare food together. Frank receives SSDI benefits, which is a disability benefit, and Greg recently lost his job, but Greg plans to apply for unemployment insurance benefits, but he hasn't yet done so. So the question again is, who, if anyone, is exempt from the work requirements? And if you'll click, please. So again, we're screening them separately, and this is actually the first one where we have a yes and a no. So Frank is exempt, meaning he doesn't have to complete the work requirements because he receives SSDI, which is a program that was in the health category. So that was one of the disability-related benefits. So he doesn't have to complete the SNAP work requirements. On the other hand, Greg, when screened separately, we determined that he does not currently meet any of the exemptions. So he's within 18 to 65 because he's 42. He doesn't have a health limitation. He's not working or in an education program. He doesn't have any caretaking responsibilities. He's not Indigenous, and I think I'm missing one, but he doesn't meet any of the exemptions. However, once Greg applies for UI benefits, because he said he indicated he was planning to do so, then he would meet the exemption once he's applied. So once he submits that and that application is processed and he starts receiving benefits, he would be exempt during that duration for receiving those benefits. All right, next slide, please. So now I'm going to pass it back over to Nicole to talk about how to meet the work requirements if someone is not exempt.
Thank you. So there are 4 ways that someone can meet the work requirements if they don't fall under any of the exemptions. The first way is to work at least 20 hours a week or an average of 80 hours a month. This can be paid work, unpaid work, volunteer work, or work done, like barter work done in exchange for goods and services. The second way to meet the work requirement is to participate in a program approved by DHS, a worker training program. And this is also would have to be done for an average of 20 hours each week or 80 hours a month. The third way to meet the work requirement would be a mix of options 1 and 2. So working or doing a training program for a total of at least 20 hours each week or 80 hours a month. And then the third program, or the fourth way to meet the work requirement, is to participate in what they call workfare, or the SNAP volunteer program. So this fourth option is the one that cannot be combined with the other options, but it's possible for the number of hours you have to commit to the program each month could be lower. It is individually based upon each person's SNAP monthly benefit amount. And there's a bit more description on the next slide about how they calculate that. And I'm sorry, my cat has decided she wants to help with the presentation. So for workfare, you have to complete a certain number of hours each month. And the number of hours for you is determined by dividing your SNAP benefit amount by $17.95, which is the minimum wage in DC. And one other unique aspect of this way to meet the work requirement is that you can share it with other people in your household who have to meet the work requirement. So I have a few examples to kind of show how these different ways to meet the work requirements work. So first example, Holly, who is 25, doesn't meet any exemptions. She has a part-time job and she's working 10 hours per week, and she has an unpaid internship where she's working 15 hours per week. Is Holly meeting the work requirements? So yes. Between her two jobs, Holly is putting in 25 hours of work, 10 paid and 15 unpaid. She can combine those two. So with those two combined, she's meeting the 20 hours per week work requirement. Next example, Ivan was screened for the work requirements at his last recertification, and he was not meeting any exemption. He found a new job where he makes $300 per week before taxes, and he works approximately 16 hours per week. So this one is a little bit of a trick question because technically Ivan is not meeting the work requirements. He is not working 20 hours per week on average. He's only working 16 hours per week. But Ivan is actually exempt from the work requirements because one of the exemptions is earning at least $217.50 per week. Because Ivan is earning $300 per week, he is exempt from the work requirement and therefore does not have to meet it. So he should fill out the work requirement screening form when it's available after June 1st and let DHS know that he meets an exemption. And then example 6. James and Karen are in the same SNAP household. They're both subject to the SNAP work requirement. Neither one meets an exemption. And their monthly benefit is $546. So they both enroll in workfare. James volunteers 13 hours per month and Karen volunteers 19 hours per month. So James and Karen are both meeting the SNAP work requirement. Because they're participating in workfare, they get to combine their hours. And based upon their monthly SNAP amount, they have to work fair about 30 hours a month. Between the two of them, they have 32 hours, so they're meeting that work requirement. So what happens if somebody does not meet the work requirements and they're not exempt from the work requirements? The penalty for failing to meet the work requirements is only being able to receive SNAP benefits for 3 months during the 3-year period between June 1st, 2026 and May 31st, 2029. So, for example, if those 3 months run after June 1st, 2026, say at the end of 2026, your time still resets May 31st, 2029. Everyone resets together 3 years after June 1st, 2026. And it's important to note that these are, as Haley mentioned earlier, these are applied individually. So if one person in a household is subject to the work requirements, they cannot receive SNAP, but other people in their households, if they are exempt from the work requirements or meeting the work requirements, they continue to receive their share of the SNAP for the household. So another example, Larry and Michelle are in a SNAP household together and they receive $546 per month. Larry is exempt from the work requirements, but Michelle is not. And she fails to meet them for 3 months. So she runs out of her 3-month allocation in the 3-year period through May 2029. What happens to their benefits? So their benefits will be reduced to $298, which is Larry's portion of the benefits. Michelle's portion is removed from the household's benefits. If she later starts to meet the work requirements, she can let DH know and have her portion reinstated. But for any month that she doesn't meet those work requirements until the end of that 3-year period, her benefits will end again because she has already exhausted the 3 months that she can receive benefits while not meeting the work requirement. There is, in addition to the ways to meet the work requirements, there are also some good cause reasons that someone can present to DHS to argue that for that month in particular, they should be excused from meeting the work requirements. And then if DHS accepts that reason, that month will not count as one of the 3 months. And some examples of this good cause include temporary illness, eviction or foreclosure, if your car or other transportation suddenly breaks down, a sudden loss of childcare, a court-ordered appearance or temporary incarceration, or domestic violence. And I'm going to turn it back over to Haley for how to be prepared for these changes.
Thanks, Nicole. You can go to the next slide. So, like we talked about, these changes are upcoming starting June 1, though the particular will depend on your recertification date. But, there are some things that we would recommend folks do in advance of these work requirements applying to them or, kind of kicking in for them to be prepared. So the first one is confirming that you have a reliable way of both obtaining information from DHS and reporting information to DHS. And if possible, we recommend folks create a district direct account. This is an account online that is basically a portal to give information about SNAP benefits, but also other benefits that you might have that are managed by the Department of Human Services or DHS. And, on District Direct, you can obtain notices, report changes, review how much your payment is monthly. There's lots of different information you can look at. And so we would recommend either creating a District Direct account, or if you already have one but you haven't used it in a while, making sure you can access it or change your password, whatever you need to do to get in there. And then relatedly, making sure your mailing address on file is updated. So you can obtain notices on District Direct, but DHS should also mail these notices to you. So making sure that the address that they have is the correct one. You can update this on District Direct. Of course, making sure that notices are coming in your preferred language. So if you, use or speak or read a language other than English, you can update this on District Direct too, and DHS should send you a notice in that language. The second thing to do to be prepared is making sure that you read all mail from DHS and respond to requests for information timely. So DHS should send a notice in the mail stating whether they believe you are exempt from the work requirements or whether you must comply with them. Again, this should also be available in your District Direct account if you have it, if you use District Direct, but they should mail it to you as well. If you think that DHS made the wrong decision, so for example, if you believe that you should be exempt, but they said that you are subject to the work requirements, you can let them know that. So again, starting June 1st, there'll be a form called the SNAP Work Requirement Screening Form, and you can fill out that form letting them know why you believe you're exempt. And if the reason for that exemption is a health-related or medical-related reason, you can also complete the SNAP medical report form, also available starting June 1st, to provide more information about that exemption. Next slide, please. The third thing you can do is make sure that you've reported any changes in circumstances since your last application or recertification. So this includes any changes to your household. Maybe you have someone who's now, living with you and you purchase and prepare food together. Maybe someone's moved out to where that's not the case anymore. Maybe you've had a change in income, your rental expenses have gone up or down, you've moved and you need to update your mailing address. Whatever information is no longer accurate, you'll want to make sure DHS knows that information. And the way you can report that is called a change in circumstances form, and it's available online in District Direct, or you can also report this to DHS, for example, by visiting a DHS service center. The fourth thing you can do is making sure you're taking advantage of all applicable income deductions that you can. So when calculating your SNAP benefits, DHS will look at the income that you receive, but they also look at some of the expenses that you receive to determine your monthly benefit amount. And in particular, you'll want to be sure that DHS knows about these expenses in particular. So 1, dependent care costs. So that's things like daycare costs. 2, any child support that you are paying. 3, medical expenses that you might have. 4, shelter expenses. So this is primarily for most people rent, but also it would be if you pay a mortgage or if you pay property taxes. And so you just want to be sure to report these expenses because it could change your monthly benefit amount and some of the other things that we talked about. So for example, if you're participating in workfare, how many hours you need to complete is dependent upon your monthly benefit amount. So you'd want to make sure you have the right monthly benefit amount. And one just quick tip in general, across the board with any benefits that you're obtaining with DHS, but kind of in particular to these things, is if you decide to drop off any documents at a DHS service center rather than uploading them on District Direct, which would actually be our recommended way to submit documents. But if you choose to go to a DHS service center, please, please, please be sure to get a date stamped copy of your submission, a receipt, or some other proof of the time and date of your submission. So if you ask for a receipt, they should give you one, but if they don't, be sure to get some sort of documentation for yourself, whether that's taking a picture of yourself at the service center or taking a picture of you dropping it off, something to where if later DHS said, can you show me that you actually turned that in, you would say, yes, here's my proof. Next slide, please. And then the last 2 things that we recommend that you can do are number 5, if you believe that you will not be exempt from the work requirements and therefore you need to complete the work requirements via one of the 4 ways that Nicole discussed, you should take steps to ensure that you can meet those work requirements at your next recertification date. So whether that's finding employment or participating in an education program, whatever you'd like to do, making sure that once those work requirements will kick in after your recertification date, you can start meeting them. And if you need help finding a job or training program or want to participate in workfare, you can reach out to DHS's SNAP Employment and Training or ENT program for assistance. We have a slide at the end that has a bunch of helpful links, and I believe that link is on there, but it's also on DHS's website. And then 6th and finally, if you have any questions about the SNAP work requirements, you can apply for help with Legal Aid DC and we can talk about those. We'll also have time at the end for questions, but we are here to answer questions, or if you think something has gone wrong, please let us know, and you can visit our website, which is linked here to learn more about how you can apply for help. And next slide, please. So, and then that, those were the things that you can do kind of in advance, what you can do to prepare for this upcoming changes. Once the changes happened, if and work requirements start applying to you, or you think that you should be exempt, but it's time for that exemption to kind of kick in, here's what you can do if you think DHS made a mistake. So one, you can tell them that and ask them to fix it. But two, you also have the right to appeal that decision to the Office of Administrative Hearings, or OAH, which is an independent agency with administrative law judges who hear these kinds of cases. And so you can appeal the DHS's decision, as long as you do so within 90 days from the date on the notice telling you DHS's decision. And you can file that appeal by going to OAH's website, by calling their phone number, faxing the appeal form to them, or going to OAH in person. And of course, you can also contact Legal Aid DC to ask for help in appealing or understanding the decision that DHS has made. And next slide, please. So like I said, here are just some helpful links that might be useful to you as you're working to understand this information. So the first two are links to DHS's website. One has information specifically about these work requirement changes. The second one is general information about the SNAP program. The third is a phone number to the DHS call center. The fourth is a link to DHS's ticket system, which is where you can escalate problems, and you basically put in information about the problem and DHS will review it and either take action on it or give you more information about it. The fifth is to the District Direct portal, which again is where you can sign up for an account in order to get information about your benefits, including notices. The next two are to Legal Aid's websites. The first is our website generally, where you can learn more about how to get help. The second one is to the more specific information about these work requirements and these changes. And then the last one is to the Office of Administrative Hearings, which again is that place where if you thought that they made an error, if you thought DHS made an error and you wanted to appeal, that's where you would do that. And we will now go to the next slide. If anyone has any questions, feel free to post in the chat. We already have one question, which is, will Legal Aid DC post this recording and past virtual trainings on its YouTube channel? I know for sure that we will be circulating the recording and the materials for this training to all of the registrants. And Nicole, you're still sharing, just so you know. And so we will be posting, we'll be posting the materials to the registrants. I think we probably can post it to your YouTube channel, but I am not in charge of that, so we will inquire.
We'll follow up.
Yeah. Next question. If someone is volunteering, how do they prove to DHS that they're meeting the hour requirements? That's a great question. DHS is launching several forms. Two of them we talked about already. The work requirements screening form, I believe the first one we talked about is called, and the next one is the medical form. They're also launching a third form, which I forget the name off the top of my head, which my understanding of that form is will be basically helping folks, report or prove that they're completing the work requirements. Is that your understanding, Nicole?
Mm-hmm. There's the SNAP work requirements screening form, SNAP verification of employment form used to verify work activity history, and SNAP medical report form.
Yes, thank you.